So just a quick update on the bee balm before we get started. You can see this guy here where I made my cut a few days ago, and the growth in two directions now. The plant is sending up two tops. We have this apical bud here, and we have a new apical bud here. So the plant is just doubling itself up. You can also see the thickness of the stalk is catching up. Here we have one that hasn't started really growing out just yet. But you can see these other leaves are becoming more like the leaves on the original plants. Instead of being super small and staying itty bitty, they're getting larger to propagate out these new tops. So that's exciting. I may come back and do a few more now that there's been a few extra days of growth. But we're going to get started on some trees. Catch you in a sec. Alright, so before we get started working on an actual tree, we have to talk a little bit about soil hydrology and the way that soils drain and interact with each other. And the general rule of thumb is that for a pot-grown tree, you're going to dig a hole about 3 to 4 pots as wide as the pot that the tree is currently sitting in. And there are a lot of garden centers, there are a lot of companies, there are a lot of nurseries and professionals who will tell you that you are supposed to add a whole bunch of manure and additional amended soils and all kinds of composts and cure-alls to really feed your tree and, increase the soil activity and the quality around those trees. But in the long run, that's not really the best thing for them. And here we have some regular soil. This is from my pile out back, so this is not the greatest quality stuff. It's general sandy loam, a little bit of clay. This may mimic your soils at home or on your site where you're thinking of planting a tree. In the middle here, you can see we've got some potting soil, a little bit of perlite. There's probably some wetting agent beads in there as well. And then on top, a healthy dose of mulch, because you should always mulch your trees right after you plant them. And when I introduce water into this site, you're going to see this potting soil wick it up. And the soil is not going to penetrate as far into the actual soil profile of what you're doing and where you are. This is obviously a gross exaggeration. In your site, you're going to have drainage, you're going to have space for that water to go, but I probably shouldn't just go drilling holes in my good Tupperwares. So the problem with this is that your roots of your tree are going to kind of circle the wagons in this area, and that's not good for the tree. It can cause girdling of your roots, it can cause girdling of the trunk. You can choke out the tree itself. If there is too much organic matter in the soil that you've amended the hole with, and not enough in the surrounding soils because you haven't been prepping the site, or because there's too great a difference, the tree is not going to expand out to the sides the way that you need those lateral roots to go for stability and to take in the greatest advantage it can from the drip line. Basically, you're setting your tree up for a system of constant needs of inputs instead of setting up a system where the tree is going to expand on its own and really flourish. So let's dig in a little deeper. So lucky for us, someone was willing to give us a dead tree. Took this guy out of the pot this morning. So I wanted to show you guys some of the pitfalls that can occur when you have a tree that's been in a pot for too long, and ways to mitigate those problems when it comes to installing them in your landscape. So the plastic pots that they grow in form an impermeable barrier. We can figure that out. They've got drainage holes in the bottom so that it doesn't become a soupy mess, but for the amount of water that the potting soil, the wetting agent holds, the pot itself is pushing back and forming a pressure that the tree grows to rely on while it's in that pot. That water pressure helps form weaker roots that are less adapted to surging out and catching water and absorbing it from your landscape. So we need to retrain the tree as well, but while it's in those pots, the roots will come out from the central root system, hit that pot wall, and then it'll start either going back through, or it'll start encircling, or in this case going up and starting to come around. This is what causes the root binding, trees to become root bound, other plants to become root bound. I'm sure you've seen veggies that have been sitting in their six-pack too long, where the plant is like popping out of the pot itself and the entire thing is roots, and you wonder how there's any soil left at all. Trees do the same thing. It's all just physics and water hydrology, or soil hydrology rather. So how do we tackle this problem? We need to, first off, tease away some of the soil to see what's going on in there. In this particular tree, I found some twine sticking out, so there's something going through. It might have been dropped by a garden center worker at the very start when this thing was first potted. It may have been left on, a bag or a pack of some of the amendments they were using, or some of the perlite, who knows. But one of the things that you can do is to start cutting away, and you'll eventually hit a large root mass. But if we do this to all of the corners and just make our cuts, sometimes you can come in with a shovel and just go straight down, or at an angle. You want to kind of get this cone shape, something where it's stable, so you may have to make some flush cuts along the bottom. The important part is to disturb this root system to get the tree going. Oh no, I need to send out more roots because something is attacking them. And you want to get a good amount of this exposed. The other way that you can go about doing this is by making a cut on the bottom of the tree root ball itself. And so you would take your shovel or your soil knife and you would score an X across the bottom, and then have that come up. So you've got your X, and then you would tease apart that bit that you cut so that the roots are exposed and heading in an outward direction instead of being in a big circling mass around the base of your tree. Now, we're still going to follow those guidelines of digging a hole 3 to 4 times the size of this root ball. You can use the pot for this if you're planting multiple trees. Keep them on hand. You can kind of, once you have a first, you can use the second to just mark out your area around. And that's going to be the best way forward. You can do them in cardinal directions around where you're planting your tree. And that's generally a good, reasonable estimation of the distance that you need. But as far as amending your soil, you should be backfilling with the same soil that you have on your site. This is going to force the tree to expand outward quicker instead of continuing this destructive behavior of circling back around and choking itself out. Once you have it established in your landscape, it's going to reap the benefits of all the other plants that you're planting in with your guild or your companions. And instead of circling the wagons, as it were. It's going to start sharing its sugars with the surrounding soils as well. This sets you up for a much better system, more productive, healthier overall, and tied into your actual ground soil instead of creating a swampy, water-holding, tree-drowning, root-encircling mess of a tree. So that's some of our thoughts. We'll get some footage of us installing these trees. We've got them here now. Not that other dead one. That's obviously not going in. But these folks wanted a nice little Japanese maple, an Acer palmatus. This one is a fire glow type. Not obviously native to the Northeast United States, but sometimes you have to design around a keystone species that someone wants. But the rest of this is all pollinator friendly, seasonal succession type plants. So we have some native nine barks, we have some buddleias, we have some coneflower echinaceas, some sedums, some creepers, phloxes and campanulas, and more bee balms, of course. So each of these has a seasonally appropriate niche that it occupies. This garden is going to provide forage for the bees from early spring through late fall with these flowers. We'll probably be adding in a few seeds from things like our wood poppy, or maybe some other creepers that we have, a couple other sedums and things, just to fill everything out. But it's all about giving that tree the space. The last big thing before we go is to make sure that when you plant your tree, you've got the root crown exposed. And when you do mulch, you want to make sure that you're leaving mulch away from the root itself. The biggest thing that I see is these volcano mounds, where it's, this pile of wood up against a tree, and all you see is the skinny little stick of the trunk sticking out. Trees shouldn't look like pencils. Trees should look like trees. If you go walk in the woods, you don't see trees growing like that, just sticks in the ground. They're really exposed. They've got their flare out, protruding through the ground cover. Some of our older trees, the root systems are so far above ground that they're tripping hazards even. So make sure that you don't have your mulch resting up against your tree. Scuff the bottoms, cut it into an X, spread that out. You can cut it into a diamond shape and backfill with your native soils, but as far as amendments go, I wouldn't bother with them. You can use them as top amendments. You can prep your soil ahead of time. You can add your amendments then with your amendments of mulch or tree chips from your local tree service or your arborists in the area. But don't ever put it in the hole with your tree. You're just asking for a lifetime of needing to supplement that tree's systems so that it doesn't fail on you in a way that you didn't expect. So yeah, that's our thoughts on trees. Come back soon. We've got more for you. Thanks for watching.